Significant changes in 1964, Barry Goldwater and the political realignment. In 1964, Senator Barry Goldwater from Arizona became the Republican presidential nominee after defeating the moderate and liberal wing of the party, including Nelson Rockefeller, in the primaries. This was a major shift as the conservative movement captured the GOP nomination for the first time in the modern era. Goldwater ran on a platform of limited federal government opposition to the expanding New Deal and Great Society programs, strong national defense, anti-communism, and states' rights. He voted against the Civil Rights Act of 1964, one of only 6 Republican senators to do so. His opposition focused on Title II and Title VII, which he argued violated private property rights, freedom of association, and risked federal overreach or racial quotas. He had supported the Civil Rights Acts of 1957 and 1960 and the 24th Amendment banning poll taxes. The election produced a landslide for incumbent Democrat Lyndon B. Johnson. Goldwater carried only his home state of Arizona plus 5 Deep South states. Those were Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and South Carolina. These Deep South states had not voted Republican for president since the end of Reconstruction in 1877. In Mississippi, Goldwater won almost all the vote. This was a dramatic flip from the earlier Democratic dominance. This election marked the first major Republican breakthrough in the Deep South and is seen as the opening chapter of the long-term realignment of Southern white voters from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. The Lyndon Johnson campaign ran the famous Daisy television ad portraying Goldwater as reckless on nuclear war. Martin Luther King Jr. criticized Goldwater's philosophy as giving aid and comfort to racists, but also said Goldwater himself was not a racist. Goldwater had quietly supported local civil rights efforts in Phoenix, including desegregating his family department store, and received a humanitarian award from the National Urban League in the 1990s. He was recognized for decades of support. His constitutional federalism stance on the 1964 act aligned with Southern resistance to rapid federal desegregation and accelerated the shift of white Southern voters. Key data: Goldwater won only 52 electoral votes. Deep South swing: Mississippi, almost 90% for Goldwater. Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and South Carolina all flipped. This set the stage for Richard Nixon's more nuanced Southern strategy and the eventual full realignment of the South to the GOP by the 1980s and 1990s. Goldwater's nomination consolidated the modern conservative movement within the Republican Party. This 1964 moment is central to debates about whether the modern GOP roots involve white nationalism or represent a constitutional conservative pushback against federal power expansion. There are data showing both a racial backlash element and Goldwater's limited government principles. Q in a section: Barry Goldwater, 1964 election and party realignment. Question 1. What was Barry Goldwater's specific vote on the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and what constitutional reasons did he give? Answer: Goldwater voted against the final bill. He supported the 1957 and 1960 Civil Rights Acts and the 24th Amendment. His opposition targeted Title II and Title VII, arguing they interfered with private persons' right to do business with whomever they chose and risked government dictating hiring and firing or leading to racial quotas. He saw these provisions as violations of private property rights and states' rights under the Constitution. Later, he reflected this vote was a regret due to political damage, but he stood by the constitutional concerns. Only 5 other Republican senators joined him in opposition. Congressional Republicans otherwise overwhelmingly supported the bill. Question 2. Which states did Goldwater win in 1964, and why was this unprecedented for the Republican Party? Answer: he won Arizona plus 5 Deep South states, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and South Carolina, for a total of 52 electoral votes. The Deep South had not voted Republican for president since Reconstruction ended in 1877. This was the first major Republican breakthrough in these states and is widely seen as the start of the white Southern realignment away from the Democratic Solid South. Question 3. Was Barry Goldwater a segregationist or white supremacist, or did his record show something different? Answer: Goldwater was not a segregationist. He desegregated his family Phoenix department store, supported local black civil rights efforts, and helped fund the early Urban League chapter, Martin Luther King Jr. said Goldwater was not himself a racist, but his philosophy gave comfort to racists. Goldwater's opposition to the 1964 Act was framed as constitutional federalism, not racial animus, but critics argued the effect matched Southern resistance to desegregation. Question 4. What was the overall 1964 election outcome? And what immediate political message did it send? Answer. Lyndon Johnson won about 61% of the popular vote and 486 electoral votes to Goldwater's 38% and 52 electoral votes. The Lyndon Johnson campaign, Daisy had attacked Goldwater as dangerous on nuclear issues. Goldwater's showing in the Deep South, despite the national landslide, signaled that Democratic support for the Civil Rights Act was costing the party white Southern voters. This sped up the long-term shift of the South toward the GOP. Question 5. How is the 1964 Goldwater campaign viewed as the beginning of the Southern strategy or party realignment? Answer. Historians often mark 1964 as the start. Goldwater states right stance and opposition to key parts of the Civil Rights Act appealed to white Southern voters alienated by federal civil rights enforcement. Richard Nixon refined this in 1968 with broader law and order and states' rights messaging. The realignment was gradual and involved many factors. By the 1980s and 1990s, the South became reliably Republican at the presidential level. Question 6. What role did Lyndon Johnson and the Democratic Party's civil rights actions play in the Southern shift after 1964? Answer. Lyndon Johnson pushed through the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. After JFK was assassinated, he reportedly said Democrats had lost the South for a generation. The 1964 election results showed immediate backlash in the Deep South. The Democrats' earlier history included segregationist leaders and connections with the Klan. Their mid-1960s support for civil rights triggered the white Southern voter shift that Goldwater first benefited from. Question 7. What long-term voting pattern emerged in the South after 1964? Answer. The 5 Deep South states. Goldwater won in 1964, trended Republican. The broader South became solid Republican in presidential elections by the Reagan era. Meanwhile, black voters in the South moved overwhelmingly to the Democratic Party after the mid-1960s. Today, the GOP continues to grow among some minority groups, complicating a single explanation of Southern politics. Question 8. How does the 1964 Goldwater moment inform current debates about whether the Republican Party is rooted in white nationalism versus constitutional conservatism on federal power and race policy? Answer. Goldwater's record is that of a limited government conservative who opposed federal overreach on constitutional grounds, not racial supremacy. The 1964 breakthrough in the Deep South happened during backlash to rapid federal desegregation, but Goldwater himself was not a segregationist with a record of civil rights support. Realignment involved many issues, and modern GOP support includes a diverse coalition. Labeling the entire post-1964 GOP as white nationalist overlooks Goldwater's principles, bipartisan opposition to civil rights in history, and current trends. A full understanding requires looking at real data, not just narratives.
Information if you have any doubt or question, but the reality of this is that there was a realignment. There is a shifting in the political ideology under Barry Goldwater in 1964. The Republican Party nominee for the President of the United States, who was defeated by Lyndon B. Johnson, and there was a major shift in the ideology.